Very good morning, students. Welcome back to webinar sessions. In zoology sessions, as yesterday, we learned about human excretory system, and especially in the previous class, we clearly understood about composition of urine and also the formation. Today, let us learn about counter current mechanism, i.e., like how hypertonic urine is formed, and some of the disorders of the kidneys, and also the differences of the disorders. And you all know, children, other than like excretory in function in kidneys also perform other functions. So, what are those? So, let us learn all about these. I welcome Ms. Jansi Garu to take over the session.
Good morning, Vijayalakshmi ma'am. Thank you very much for introduction and for being with me. Hope students, you're all fine. You're doing well. And you also followed whatever so far we completed in this particular chapter. Let's continue. Let me quickly run the slides so that you will have almost like recapitulation of what we have done earlier. And I stopped here, right? Counter current mechanism. I stopped over here. What did we learn earlier? We learned about physiology of urine formation, which is called as, that is ultrafiltration or glomerular filtration, selective reabsorption, and tubular secretion. Today we are going to learn something called as counter current mechanism. Now, what is this counter current mechanism? Let's try to understand word by word. Counter means opposite. Current, flow of liquid, the section of kidney. Now I just want to recapitulate this point, that outer region of our kidney over here is called as cortex. This outer region is cortex, and inner region, this one over here, we call it as medulla, where all these pyramids are present. Outer region, cortex region, is dark because it has got a lot of blood capillaries. So this, just keep it in mind that we are having cortex and medulla. Now, if you take nephrons and try to look at this particular diagram over here, if you try to study again structure of nephrons and how they are actually placed in kidney, we are having over here, this is the outer cortex region, which is dark, again, as I said, due to presence of lot of blood capillaries, because every glomerulus has around 50 capillaries in it. That is glomerular capillaries. And then this is the medullary region. So what we know is, what we understand is that this Bowman's capsule, PCT, that is proximal convoluted tubule, and DCT over here, all these things, main important constituents of nephron, they are all located in cortex. Whereas it is loop of Henle, which you find that is present in medulla. This is the reason this medulla is light in region. Now, connection, another point that we need to understand before we go to countercurrent mechanism. Now, the space that you find, please have a look at this particular diagram. The space that is seen, white space over here, whatever space is present in between the nephrons and in between this peritubular capillaries or vasa recta, whatever the space is present, right? Over here again, this region, what you're able to see, all this is called as interstitium. Please note the spelling. Interstitium, interstitium. It is all interstitium. There is now a connection between this interstitium, this blood capillaries, and this nephron, because there is movement of solute particles or solvent going on over here. This particular region. So there is, let me go to previous slide, one of the previous slides over here. I just want your attention over here. You can see this peritubular capillaries over here. All these capillaries which are surrounding PCT, DCT over here in this region, we call this as peritubular capillaries. Whereas capillaries that surround this loop of Henle down in the medullary region, we call this as vasa recta. This. So we find there is connection over here because movement of particles or solute and solvent takes place between this nephron, peritubular capillaries, vasa recta, interstitium. Movement takes place. How does that take place and what way it is helpful? Now let's try to understand in this concept, which we call as counter current mechanism. Now, as I mentioned, counter means opposite direction. whose opposite direction we are talking over here, or referring to liquids opposite direction. Current means flow of liquids. So here now let's come to this main diagram. This is the main picture which actually depicts this title of the slide, counter current mechanism. So here you can see this particular brown color structure. As you can see this cursor moving. Yeah, this is the loop of Henle. When nephric filtrate moves through this loop of Henle, we find that over here this liquid is coming down, and then here this is the ascending limb. Here the fluid is moving up. So in this you can see this is the arrow. That means fluid is coming down over here, and here you can see this is a white arrow which shows that fluid is moving up. So this is what is this movement of fluid or liquid in opposite direction. Now I hope that you understand the word counter, moving of the liquid in opposite direction. Once here the nephric filtrate is coming down, whereas after taking this U-turn over here, this is moving up. So this is the movement of liquid in opposite direction, that is nephric filtrate. Now what is happening because of this movement over here in descending limb and ascending limb? When this fluid is coming down, nephric filtrate is coming down through this descending limb, we have learned already in selective reabsorption that water is absorbed. Here in this descending limb, here water is absorbed, reabsorbed, it is taken. When water is reabsorbed, so what is now happening to the nephric filtrate concentration? It is becoming more and more concentrated. The concentration means we are talking about its concentration with reference to blood, that is plasma. So slowly it is becoming hypertonic. Now, when this again starts moving up from here, you find sodium ions coming out. Of course, potassium and chloride also comes out through this ascending limb over here. So first type of movement that we are talking in this counter current mechanism is that we are referring to the movement of nephric filtrate. So first liquid is coming down and then it is moving up. So liquid is moving in these two limbs in opposite direction. Once it is coming down in the other limb, it is moving up, right? What is happening if this is coming down over here? Here, from here, water is absorbed. Water is reabsorbed rather. Water is reabsorbed. So thereby, what happens to nephric filtrate? It becomes concentrated. From any solution, you try to remove water, then or any solvent, that particular solution becomes concentrated. So the same thing is happening over here. This is very essential because we want our water to retain in our body. We don't want water to be lost along with the nephric filtrate. Here in the initial stages, here in proximal convoluted tubule, water reabsorption does take place, but not by 100%. So part of that absorption takes place over here. So this is first counter current mechanism, one of the steps over here that we spoke about. Now here in counter current mechanism, there is another place also where this counter current mechanism is taking place, and that is occurring, that is taking place in this blood capillaries over here, which we call it as vasa recta. Vasa recta is the capillary that surrounds loop of Henle down here. So here you find this blood, its movement is from here. That means it is moving from here in this direction and moving upwards over here, opposite direction. Now in what way this is connected? Let's see this here. See this, all the sodium which is coming out over here through this ascending limb, this sodium, part of the sodium remains here in this particular interstitium, and part of the sodium enters this blood over here. And slowly this solute particles, that means blood, in this blood you find presence of sodium. All the sodium moves upward from here in this way. Similarly, water which has come out also joins blood over here, which is present in this capillary and moves up. So here we find the movement of the blood. Here it is coming down, that means it is descending in this tube, whereas it is ascending over here, moving upwards. So this is again the movement of the blood in opposite direction. When we are looking at nephrons, we find that first it is the filtrate which is moving down and then this is moving up. But here when you look at vasa recta, it is coming down from here and moving up. So what is happening due to this is that Sodium which has been absorbed here, we have learned already that this ascending limb, it is permeable to sodium ions. Any other thing doesn't come out other than sodium, potassium and chloride. So these sodium ions which come out, they enter this blood which is present in vasa recta, and then it keeps moving up. Similarly, water which has been reabsorbed in this loop of Henle from this descending limb is also taken and it moves up, because of which this nephric filtrate which moves up, now this becomes concentrated or hypertonic, and hypertonic urine is produced. Now let me try to come back again to sodium ions. This sodium ions which has joined this blood over here, or once it moves up, all the sodium ions, they come out of this loop of Henle, and whatever is the concentration, let me come back to this word, interstitium. In this interstitium, which is nothing but fluid, the space that is present over here in between the nephrons, and even in loop here also, the space that is present over here. In this interstitium, we find presence of water, presence of even solute. Solute particles are present. Especially what of solute? Sodium, potassium, chloride, and urea. You remember when we were discussing yesterday, non-threshold substances, I mentioned there. If you permit me, I would like to just go back to one of the slides over here. Here. Low threshold substances. Here we learned something called low threshold substances. That means out of all the things which actually got filtered over here, one of the substances is reabsorbed, but in very less quantity, minute quantities, and that is nothing but, just look at over here. What is this? Which is reabsorbed along with water? Urea. Small amount of urea is taken back. Now let's try to understand why this urea is taken back, connecting it with our countercurrent mechanism. So here what is happening is that whatever this particular region is present, which we call it as interstitium, this is filled up with water, this is filled up with sodium ions, all solute particles. So to maintain that osmolarity, number of solute particles needed, which is present in 1 liter solution, we need certain concentration here in interstitium. Why that concentration is needed in this particular solution in this interstitium is that, so that water can come out from here through osmosis. Why will water simply come out? Through this limb over here, through this descending limb, unless outer concentration is on outer interstitium is having higher concentration than it won't come out. So to maintain that minimum concentration, because of which water can move out, that is called osmolarity. For that reason, we need sodium ions over here. Sodium ions and a minute concentration of urea. That is why urea is absorbed from here, that is from collecting duct. Small amount of it moves to maintain concentration. Once again, why do we need concentration here in this interstitium? Because of that only water can come out. Water reabsorption occurs. We want water to be reabsorbed so that urine can be hypertonic. So for that reason, now from where we are getting sodium? Sodium is reabsorbed over here. And that will try to maintain the concentration, which is osmolarity, which we call it. Similarly, small quantity of urine is also, urea is also absorbed to maintain concentration here in this region, so that water can be made to come out through osmosis. Now, another point. When sodium has to actually be maintained over here only, why is it that sodium is, getting into this capillaries and then taking this journey, and then sodium is again coming off? The sodium particles which are entering in this blood, they all again come off. Whichever is entering, they all come out. Why should they come out? Why are they coming out? Because your concentration here on this slide, because we want all the sodium, the system wants the sodium to stay in medullary region. If the sodium ions concentration is more over here, then automatically from medullary region, sodium can diffuse into cortex. We don't want sodium ions or urea to move into this cortical region. We want everything to stay here in medullary region. So temporarily, what happens to this sodium? Extra sodium, all those small ions, they enter into this blood capillaries, which is vasa recta. they take this short journey and then come off, so that the sodium ions stay back here only. So once again, let me recapitulate very quickly. What is this counter current mechanism? First and the foremost point is that you find that there is connection between the space that is over here in between the nephrons in kidneys, which we call it as interstitium. Interstitium is nothing but it is filled up with water and all the other solute in it, namely sodium, potassium, chloride and urea, small amount of urea. From where is that urea coming? It is being reabsorbed through this collecting duct over here, right? So we find that in even after this initial filtration, after glomerular filtration, there is still movement of particles, solvent, that is water, between these three, or among these three things, that is nephron, blood capillaries and interstitium. So we understand that countercurrent mechanism means movement of fluid in opposite direction. So here there is nephric filtrate which is moving down here and then it is moving up. This is the first movement of liquid moving in opposite direction. What is happening because of this? Here in this particular limb, water is coming off. Why is this water coming off? Because outer concentration is more. It is because of the presence of all this sodium, potassium, chloride and minimum quantity of urea. All these things make outer interstitium concentration more, because of which water comes off through osmosis. We want water to be reabsorbed. First, our own water doesn't go out what our body needs, and secondly, urine which is being passed out, it becomes hypertonic. So that is the significance of this liquid moving in opposite direction. The greater the length of this loop of Henle, the higher the concentration or the hypertonic liquid it becomes. Next, another place where we find this countercurrent mechanism working is in the blood capillary, which is surrounding this loop of Henle, which we call it as vasa recta. So what happens in this particular thing is sodium ions which come out of this ascending limb, part of them enter very easily, they diffuse into this blood capillaries. Into this only we find even water diffusing in. But once this moves up, this blood capillaries move up into the cortical region, we find sodium ions coming out, or if needed, even water comes out. So all the sodium ions which have entered, they all come out. Why they diffuse out and they stay only here as a part of interstitium? We don't want sodium ions to move. If suppose this is not there, if this vasa recta is not there, concentration of sodium ions, if it increases in this medullary region, they automatically move into cortex, and we don't want movement of sodium diffusion into cortex region. So for that reason, temporary movement of the sodium ions work in this way, enter into these capillaries and come off, so that they remain here itself. This is what is countercurrent mechanism, because of which water is reabsorbed in loop of Henle, thus rendering urine hypertonic. Now, let me come to this picture. Don't get scared by looking at these figures and all. Just want to explain this particular concept. Let's concentrate on these numbers which are given over here. See, descending limb, we have something called as 300. That means per liter of solvent, we are having 300 solute particles over here. But as water keeps moving down, this is loop of Henle that we are talking to. When nephric filtrate moves down, water is coming out, it is reabsorbed. And just now I told you the reason. When water is reabsorbed, number of solute particles, they keep on increasing because solvent is coming out, water is coming out. So here initially you find 300 solute particles, then the particles number increased to 600, 900 and 1200. And slowly here it is 1400. But again, when this nephric filtrate starts moving upwards, we know that it is sodium which is diffusing out. Part of the sodium here, it diffuses out actively, and in the upper regions, passively, it diffuses out. So along with sodium, we find even chloride moving out, sorry. So when solute particles also move out, again, what happens to osmolarity? Number of solute particles, we can see when nephric filtrate reaches this distal convoluted tubule, it will regain the same composition as you find in the beginning in PCT, somewhere around 100 to 300. So slowly from here also, when the solute particles are taken off, again, slowly the concentration keeps on increasing. And finally, we end up over here with hypertonic urine. So this is what is this counter current mechanism. So let me move to the previous. Let me just very quickly come to this particular picture over here. Dear students, see, this is solvent. Solvent, that means any fluid, any liquid into which if you take some solute particles and dissolve, you don't see that particular thing. So here, if it is salt water solution, salt is solute. So if at all I remove all these water molecules, we find that solute salt particles are more in number. So here also the same thing is happening. When water is coming off, number of solute particles, their number keeps on increasing. Thereby you find that the concentration keeps on increasing. When it reaches distal convoluted tubule, again distal convoluted tubule absorbs, it reabsorbs. We have seen already what happens over here, what are the substances which are reabsorbed. And finally, once again, you find hypertonic urine being excreted out or sent out. So this is countercurrent mechanism. Hope you understood. Let's move further. Now, in the first PPT that we started this chapter with, I already told you that we have extra other organs also that are present in our body doing the function of excretion, but they are not main excretory organs. They are meant for something else, but simultaneously they try to remove waste things that are produced as a process of metabolism. To begin with, first large intestine. We know that there is no digestion of process which takes place, digestive process which takes place in large intestine. It helps in reabsorption of water. All the undigested waste material, it moves through this, which we call bowel movement, stays temporarily here in rectum and is sent out through anus. So large intestine is removing solid undigested waste material out. The main work of large intestine or the digestive system is not that, but it is also doing that extra work. Similarly, lungs. We have lungs especially to take in oxygen, that is to take in air. Again, in that we want oxygen. But at the same time, because of metabolic activities and internal cellular respiration which goes on, CO2, carbon dioxide gas is produced. Along with carbon dioxide gas, any other volatile substance that is present in our body is made to send out through the same lungs. So main function of lungs is not to remove carbon dioxide, it is to take in oxygen, but at the same time it is removing CO2 out when we exhale. So these are also doing the same excretory function, extra works. In the same way here, skin. Over here, you can find, this is the structure of the skin. I'm not getting into the details. My concentration is over here, which is a sweat gland, which you can find it present in dermis. And here there's another gland, which we call it as oil gland. So sweat glands remove sweat. Sweat is liquid, again, excretory waste that is generated from our body. Sweat is a combination of water, salt, urea, and sometimes if you do exercise, then even lactic acid is produced. So sweat glands remove all those things. Similarly, if you're talking about oil glands, which are otherwise called as sebaceous glands, sweat glands are also called as sudoriferous glands. Sudoriferous, C-U-D-O, sudoriferous glands. Similarly, oil gland otherwise is called as sebaceous glands. So these oil glands, what they do, these oil glands try to remove liquid, which we call it as sebum, S-E-B-U-M, sebum. This is a combination of fatty acids, lipids, and waxes, sterols. All these hydrocarbons are sent out. And sebum is the one which actually tries to oil our hair, skin, and protects it. This is its function. Now, while teaching itself in the first chapter, first PPT, sorry, I mentioned about liver. Liver is very, very important organ of our body, doing lot of work. And in digestive system, you have already at length studied about liver and its functions. There are 10 important functions which you have already studied. But I'm concentrating here only about excretory part. So liver is the one which is doing oxidative deamination. That means it is removing ammonia, amino group from all amino acids, and it is converting it into urea. So oxidative deamination. So production of urea through ornithine cycle or urea cycle takes place again in this liver only. In fact, yesterday also we have studied about urine. We have come across the point that color of urine is pale yellow. It is because of produced and released by liver. Liver holds an important place when we are talking about even again excretion. In fact, nitrogenous waste product urea is produced here. Kidneys help in removing, but production of that is taking place here in liver through ornithine cycle, and before that oxidative deamination. Now, ornithine cycle, dear students, I'm not getting into the details of this because we find here at some places energy currency, that is ATP, is being utilized, and names of enzymes which helps in this catalyzing all these reactions. I'm not getting into the details, but in short, I just want to mention few things about this ornithine cycle. Ornithine cycle, it goes on in liver. It is also called as urea cycle, and it is also called as Henschel-Krebs cycle. This particular, sorry, Henschel-Krebs cycle, this particular ornithine cycle, first thing what happens is that we know that ammonia is produced. How ammonia is produced, we have studied in detail. Amino is removed from amino acid. That amino takes up one proton, becomes ammonia over here. And this ammonia, it takes one carbon dioxide gas, and it becomes the first substance over here, which we call it as carbamyl phosphate. So ammonia takes carbon dioxide. These two substances, they react and they form the first substance, which is called carbamyl phosphate. Two ATP molecules are used up over here. Then second step, this carbamyl phosphate, this is being taken by ornithine over here, which is there, and then it forms the second step, which is called citrulline. Here again ATP is used up. Then citrulline in the third step, it converts into arginosuccinate. This is one sub-step before formation of arginine. And finally, this gets converted into ornithine and urea. So here you can see production of urea, which is being sent out. Blood takes this, goes to kidneys, and kidneys filter it out. So this is what is in short about ornithine cycle or urea cycle. Now, other functions of kidneys. Ma'am, Vijayalakshmi ma'am in the beginning only introduction said kidneys do a lot of things. Main function so far we have learned, it is about excretion, that is removal of the waste material from the body, nitrogenous waste material to be precise. There are other functions also which are performed by kidneys. What are the other functions? First, as you can see on your screen, osmoregulation. Have you noticed one thing, that the day you take a lot of water, urine output is more. That means a lot of fluid goes out of the body. The day you you starve, or maybe you fast, or maybe you don't take a lot of fluids due to any reason, or you do a lot of exercise, on that particular day, urine output is less, right? Urine is produced, but output of water is less over there. That is what is called osmoregulation. That is nothing but maintaining water balance. So kidneys also help in maintaining water balance in our body. That is what is called osmoregulation. Osmo, related to word water. Similarly, there is something called homeostasis. We have already learned what is homeostasis, but I did not tell you that it is homeostasis. Homeostasis is actually the process where the ionic composition of blood is maintained. That means whatever is the pH of the blood, whatever ions or whatever solute particles should be present in the blood, the concentration, that is maintained. And that is what happens, because of which unwanted things are sent out of the blood in through tubular secretion process, what we have learned. So what is this homeostasis? Homeostasis means it is the maintenance of the ionic composition of the blood, or maintaining the equilibrium of that blood, ionic composition of the blood. That is not disturbed. It is maintained in our body. It is the same. Stability is maintained. That condition is called homeostasis. How this is done? I mentioned before only that from unwanted things, whatever are present in blood capillaries, or whether it is peritubular capillaries, all those things, they come out and they are given into, or they are poured into nephron. So that is what is helping to maintain homeostasis. Osmoregulation, you take a lot of water which your body doesn't need, all that extra water is sent out through more urine output. You take less water, then water is conserved, it is being preserved through this process, again called as osmoregulation. We will study how this process goes on over here in detail in the further slides. Now, apart from these two related functions, there is another important function that these kidneys take care of, and that is that kidneys also produce one type of hormone. I'm talking about one type of hormone called as erythropoietin. This is a local hormone produced by kidneys. Now, as you can see, eri means we are talking something related to RBCs. So this hormone erythropoietin, it helps in the stimulation of production of RBCs in our stem cells, in our bones. in our bone marrow. So erythropoietin helps in the production of RBCs. So these are the three other functions in addition to excretion done by kidneys. Now let's study in detail one after the other. Osmoregulation. Osmoregulation. Now here you have something called as osmoregulators and osmoconformers. Dear students, I'm sure you would have or already in your 9th class learnt about a few terms, like poikilothermic animals, homeothermic animals, cold-blooded, warm-blooded. What did we learn over there? Cold-blooded animals, they are the organisms which try to change their body temperature according to environment. If you're talking about warm-blooded animals, that is homeothermic animals, wherever they are, they maintain the same body temperature. So especially birds and mammals, we human beings, we are part of homeotherms. That is, we maintain body temperature, same body temperature. If I throw you in any desert or put you in water or anywhere else, your body temperature remains the same. That is around 36.9 degrees centigrade or 37 degrees on an average. So we are homeotherms. Similarly, when we are talking about osmoregulation over here, some of the organisms like vertebrates, especially over here, these organisms, they try to maintain the fluid, whatever is the concentration. As I mentioned earlier about homeostasis, they maintain that ionic composition, their whatever environment is there present in their body, internal environment, the concentration of all these solutes, they try to maintain the same thing wherever they are, irrespective of the environment. So they are osmoregulators. That is, ionic composition of the blood is maintained. It is not disturbed. Such organisms which maintain the ionic composition, maintaining the same solute concentration, irrespective of the environment, they are osmoregulators. So they have very narrow range. When we are talking about osmoconformers, most of the invertebrates, marine invertebrates, they are of this category. If you take them and put them in any environment, according to the concentration of the environment, their body environment inside also changes. That means concentration also changes. Suppose if outside environment concentration, it is very high, they try to take more solute from outside. If outside concentration is less, from their body, they try to lose solute so that their body concentration will be on par with, or it is on par with the environment. So they are called as osmoconformers. Osmoconformers, in short, are the organisms which try to maintain the concentration of their body, internal concentration, same as that of environment, whereas osmoregulators are the ones which try to maintain same stable concentration irrespective of the environment wherever they are. Osmoregulators. Now, let me go back to previous slide. I told you that the day that you take a lot of water, urine output is more, and the day you take less water, urine output is less. That is what is osmoregulation. So, because of which there is a production of, that means there would be situations where hypotonic and hypertonic urine is produced accordingly. How this happens, let's try to look at it. So, less water. If you are taking less water on a particular day, maybe you are fasting, maybe you are indulged in work due to internal bleeding, whatever it is, less water consumption takes place. What type of urine is produced on that day? It is hypertonic urine which is produced. Now, there are four important, let me go back. There are four important situations or mechanisms which take place in our body which bring about this concept of osmoregulation. There are four important things that are mechanism which take place in our body because of which this osmoregulation process goes on and the internal environment concentration is maintained. So first condition, let's try to look at this. You are taking less water. If you are taking less water, it means what happens to blood volume of the blood in general in our body, less blood volume is present. Less water consumption, blood volume is less. If blood volume is less, now what happens to the pressure over here, glomerular pressure that I'm talking about? So obviously the glomerular filtration pressure over here is also less. If this pressure is less, glomerular filtrate rate, that means the amount of or the volume of the fluid that is present over here, normally it should be 125 ml that is produced, right? Both the kidneys produce 125 ml. But on that day, when you are not taking enough water, you don't find that much of the urine output. That means nephric filtrate is less over here. When nephric filtrate is less over here initially, then obviously the urine output over here is also less. And with a lot of water absorption taking place, making it hypertonic. So first mechanism is that if you are taking less water, please listen with concentration. If you are taking less water, eventually volume of the blood is also less. It becomes less in our body. Blood volume becomes less. If blood volume becomes less, what happens over here is here in this here. What happens to the pressure, glomerular pressure? When blood volume is less, pressure is also less. If pressure is less, the filtration rate also goes down. If filtration rate goes down, so obviously here the amount of the urine output that we are talking about, this is also less. So this is what happens. That means less water intake, less urine output. This is first thing. Second thing is that let's try to understand its relation with the second mechanism over here by looking at these terms, ADH and vasopressin, antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin. Dear students, let me just roll back to one of the important slides which I spoke to you yesterday about. What did I tell you over here when we were talking about this reabsorption? We were discussing yesterday reabsorption, right? What did we understand? Proximal convoluted tubule, whatever it has to take back, without any condition, it takes back all those things. Whatever are needed by our blood, by our body, it takes back. With it mandatorily takes back all those things. But if you are talking about reabsorption of water, here in DCT, distal convoluted tubule, and in collecting duct, this is not mandatory. Water reabsorption in DCT and collecting duct, this is under the influence of one hormone, which we call it as antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin. Hope you recollected. Yesterday I taught you about this. So this is the hormone which is actually secreted by master of all glands, what we call it as pituitary gland. From posterior lobe, it is secreted, this particular hormone. Now try to understand the connection. If that hormone is present, then only DCT and collecting duct reabsorbs water. If reabsorption of water takes place, then only urine becomes more hypertonic. So now let me come back with its trying to understand its connection over here. So what is happening over here? This boy over here is taking less water. So if less water is taken inside, water is taken less inside. So we cannot let our nephrons to, allow more water to go out. So that time ADH or vasopressin is released by pituitary gland. When ADH or vasopressin is released, then distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct reabsorbs water. Already water is less. You drink very less water, or you drank very less water. On top of that, our kidneys lose water in the form of urine. Then our body gets dehydrated. Dehydration is very serious condition. So when you take less water, nephrons don't allow water to go out, more water to go out. So that time, distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct, they realize, oh, we should reabsorb water. When will they realize that we have to these two should reabsorb water? When this hormone is present. So when ADH or vasopressin is released, when this hormone is present, that time these two reabsorbs water. So when water is reabsorbed, hypertonic urine is produced. Hope you understood. When you are taking less water, now two conditions, two mechanisms we are studying over here in this particular slide. When you are taking less water, blood volume is less, pressure of the blood is less, glomerular filtration pressure is less, rate of glomerular filtration is less, so less nephric filtrate is produced, thereby hypertonic urine goes out. Second thing is that when you take less water, then automatically from pituitary gland, vasopressin is released. In the presence of this hormone, distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct also reabsorbs water. So thereby we find hypertonic urine is produced. So this is one way how water control takes place. Now let's understand the opposite of this. I'm sure when you have understood these two mechanisms with reference to less water, exactly opposite of this takes place when we are talking about more water. Yes. Now let's see what is happening over here. When you are taking more water, when you take more water, it is hypotonic urine that is being excreted out. What is hypotonic urine? Its concentration is very, very less when compared to blood or plasma's concentration. So here you can see in the previous picture, here the water consumed by this particular boy over here is very less. But when you look at this boy, he is taking a lot of water over here. So when a lot of water is taken inside, opposite of the things take place, what I explained previously. Red volume increases. When red volume increases, the pressure over here in this glomerular, what we call glomerular filtration pressure increases. If pressure increases, glomerular filtration rate increases. Nephric filtrate, whatever is formed, it is more. When more nephric filtrate is produced, more filtrate, more urine goes out. This is the first mechanism. So what is the first thing that is happening is that when you are taking more water, increase in water increases blood volume, that is volume of the blood increases. If volume of the blood increases, the pressure that is rendered by that particular blood in this glomerular, here in this glomerulus, it is more. So if glomerular pressure is more, ultrafiltration is more high, rate of filtration is also high. So more than 125 ml per minute is produced. That is the nephric filtrate is more than that. More filtrate is produced, then obviously more urine output takes place. And that means more water goes out. This is the first mechanism. Now let's try to understand with reference to ADH. What did you see over here? ADH was present, because of which distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct took back water, reabsorbed water. But if you are taking lot of water, then brain realizes that there are certain special cells present in our body, which we call them as osmoreceptors, which try to understand, okay, the amount of the water or the pressure of the blood, they try to understand and give a message to brain. So when you take lot of water, brain understands, okay, body, a lot of water is present. That time, pituitary gland doesn't release in sufficient quantities ADH. This is not released. It is released in very less quantities, minute quantities. That time, what happens to this distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct? They don't reabsorb water from the nephric filtrate. They are not taking back water. So when water is not taken back into the body, then obviously hypotonic urine is produced. So two things are happening. One, high blood pressure is more, so lot of nephric filtrate is produced. Now lot of nephric filtrate means water content is more in that, so hypotonic urine is produced. Second thing, if you are taking lot of water, ADH or vasopressin secretion becomes very, very less. And if this hormone is not present in sufficient quantities, distal convoluted tubule and as well as collecting duct don't reabsorb water. When water reabsorption does not take place, finally hypotonic urine is produced. So this is what happens. So we have understood two mechanisms. Let me roll back. Osmoregulation, we understood over here how it is taking place. What are the two conditions under which hypotonic and hypertonic urine is produced? Now let's try to understand the third mechanism over here, because of which the osmoregulation process goes on, and that, as you can see, it is called as RAS, R-A-A-S. R-A-A-S, RAS means, the full form of this, RAAS, please take down full form for this abbreviation. Renin angiotensin aldosterone system. RENIN, renin angiotensin or angiotensinogen aldosterone system. This is the full form. Now let's try to understand what is that in detail over here. Once again, dear students, every time I try to show you always this particular structure of nephrons, because you can easily understand in what context we are talking, why we have discussing a particular topic over there. That is the reason the structure of nephron is always there. Now here, we know that if you look at the structure of nephron, this particular region, which we call it as PCT, it is very close to Bowman's capsule. But when you try to, in detail, try to study DCT also comes very close to Bowman's capsule, very close to Bowman's capsule. Now here, what happens is that some of the cells of our afferent arteriole, when you look at it, some of the cells of this afferent arteriole is the one which is bringing blood, right, into this. So smooth muscles, some of the smooth muscles of this afferent arteriole, which is bringing blood, they get specialized to perform some special function, and we call them as juxtaglomerular cells. As you can see over here, juxtaglomerular cells, they are called as JG cells. Similarly, you find even this specialization of the cells, modification of the cells taking place, and that takes place in this DCT. Okay, can you see this part, this DCT, this distal convoluted tubules? Some of the cells of those DCT, they also become specialized. That is epithelial cells, cuboidal epithelial cells, they also become specialized, which we call it as macula densa. There is also third region, which is not given in our textbook, which we call them as mesanglial cells. So efferent arteriole, blood which is coming out through efferent arteriole, some of them also get specialized. So juxtaglomerular cells, some of the cells of afferent arteriole, mesanglial cells, some of the modified cells of efferent arteriole, and some of the cells of distal convoluted tubule, modified cells, which are macula densa. These three put together form one specialized region, which we call it as juxtaglomerular apparatus. What is juxtaglomerular apparatus? This is combination of specialized cells of three different groups. There are three different specialized regions present in nephrons. What are those three different regions? Once again, first one, it is smooth muscle cells of afferent arteriole. Some of them are this. Second one, efferent arteriole. Dear students, efferent arteriole that I'm talking about, it is not given in the textbook, but we call them as mesanglial cells. They and distal convoluted tubule. Some of the specialized cells, they become specialized. These are epithelial cells, cuboidal epithelial cells, which we call macula densa. So juxtaglomerular cells and this macula densa, along with that mesanglial cells, this particular region which you can see over here, they become specialized to form, which we call juxtaglomerular apparatus. Now, what does this juxtaglomerular apparatus do with reference to osmoregulation? Let's try to understand the same thing over here and then move on to the next slide. Suppose you are taking less water. I'm coming back to less water condition. You are taking less water. So when less water is taken by you, obviously what happens to the pressure over here? We know that if you are taking less water, blood volume decreases. If blood volume decreases, pressure in the blood decreases. And that pressure in the blood can be noticed over here in Bowman's capsule. In short, glomerular filtration pressure decreases. So when this happens, that means when glomerular filtration pressure decreases, at that particular time, this juxtaglomerular apparatus, this recognizes, it realizes, oh, blood pressure is falling. That means there is less water consumption. It recognizes, realizes that, and then this region secretes or releases one substance or hormone called renin, enzyme called renin. R-E-N-I-N, renin. Renin is released by juxtaglomerular apparatus whenever the pressure of the blood decreases. Pressure of the blood decreases when your water intake is less. So when you take less water, pressure decreases. When pressure decreases, that time juxtaglomerular apparatus realizes that and releases enzyme renin. Now what will this renin do? RENIN renin do? This particular renin, it tries to bring about the conversion of one substance which takes place in liver and lungs. So let me move on to this next slide. Just have a look at over here. So when water decrease in intravascular and fall in blood group, that time juxtaglomerular apparatus, it releases one enzyme renin. Any enzyme in the body is actually in its inactive form. That is the reason we add the prefix which is pro. So this is pro-renin. Dear students, I know that you have already studied about one enzyme called renin in your first chapter, digestive system, but that was RENNIN, renin, whereas this renin is different. That renin, RENNIN renin, it is a substance, it is the enzyme that helps in the digestion of milk, especially casein, that is milk protein, which you find it present in infants. But here, this is RENIN. This renin is different. This is one of the differences you have to learn. Very important question. Now, what this renin does is that there is one substance, one protein that is produced by liver. Liver produces one protein which is called as angiotensinogen. This is inactive protein. This angiotensinogen is converted into stable protein, which is angiotensin. Now, again, all these conversions take place because of enzymes. So angiotensin in liver, from liver in lungs, it first gets converted into angiotensin 1 or angiotensinogen 1. This is unstable product, and then it becomes angiotensinogen 2. This is angiotensin 1, angiotensinogen 1, and here we call it as angiotensin 2. Now, what this angiotensin 2 does is that it tries to stimulate adrenal cortex, adrenal gland. In your second PPT, we have studied on top 2, it stimulates, that is, it asks that particular gland, endocrine gland, to release one hormone called as aldosterone. This aldosterone, when this aldosterone is present, that time distal convoluted tubule, let me come back to this, distal convoluted tubule and this collecting duct, what these two do is that they start absorbing, taking back lot of sodium from nephric filtrate. So when sodium is taken back, obviously water is taken back. We know the connection. When water moves, water always moves wherever the concentration is more. So when sodium is taken back, it is reabsorbed. DCT and collecting ducts try to take a lot of sodium. So obviously from this nephric filtrate, water is reabsorbed. When water is reabsorbed, again what happens to blood volume? It increases. When blood volume increases, blood pressure also increases. This is how this juxtaglomerular apparatus helps in bringing about the osmoregulation process. So once again, I would like to recapitulate very quickly what we have learned about juxtaglomerular apparatus. Juxtaglomerular apparatus is a combination of, according to our textbook, two things. One is juxtaglomerular cells and the other one is macula densa. Macula densa are the specialized cells of DCT, distal convoluted tubule, cuboidal epithelium tissue, whereas juxtaglomerular cells are the specialized smooth muscle cells of afferent arteriole. These two, they together form juxtaglomerular apparatus. Juxtaglomerular apparatus work is to recognize or realize fall in blood pressure. That means fall in the glomerular filtration pressure. Once there is fall in this, immediately juxtaglomerular apparatus releases an enzyme. And what is the work of that? What is the name of that enzyme? It is renin. Once renin is released in blood, this renin immediately brings about the conversion of angiotensinogen into angiotensin. This is propeptide. Pro-protein. Then once this angiotensin is converted, this conversion takes place in lungs. This particular substance, this particular protein is produced in liver, whereas the conversion of it takes place in lungs. So finally, we have angiotensin 1 getting converted into angiotensinogen 2. This angiotensinogen 2, it asks the whatever suprarenal gland is present above kidneys, that is adrenal gland part. In that adrenal gland you find a region which is called cortex region. It asks that one to release one hormone. What is the name of the hormone? Aldosterone. Once aldosterone, look at over here, once aldosterone is produced, that time what happens? Collecting duct and distal convoluted tubule, they start taking back solute. That is all ions, sodium, chloride, potassium ions back. When sodium ions are taken back, obviously water is also reabsorbed due to osmosis. So because of which retention of water takes place and slowly the volume of blood increases. This is the work of juxtaglomerular apparatus. Now, once the pressure increases, blood volume pressure increases, then what happens? Continuously this process, juxtaglomerular releasing renin, doesn't take place. Once there is an increase in the pressure of blood volume, then that is recognized by the wall of heart. This auricular wall of heart, it recognizes, it realizes, okay, blood volume is increasing. That means there is enough water inside, the pressure of the blood is increasing. That time, from this wall of the heart, there is another substance released over here, and that is called as ANF or ANP. What is that? Atrial natriuretic factor or atrial natriuretic peptide. P standing for peptides because this is a protein. So once wall of this heart releases this particular peptide or protein, that what will this do? Once the pressure has increased, now pressure should come back to its normalcy. That time, what happens is that this substance helps in bringing about dilation of blood capillaries. Blood capillaries which are there, dilation of the blood capillaries take place so that the pressure decreases and it becomes normal. That means ANF is working against or antagonistic. It is antagonistic to juxtaglomerular apparatus. This helps in increasing the blood pressure. Once blood pressure keeps on increasing continuously, it is not good. So it should come back to its normalcy also, and that is brought about by ANF or ANP. So once the pressure keeps on increasing, how the pressure increases? Because water is taken back. We understood the role of aldosterone and reabsorption of sodium ions, chloride ions and water. Once water is taken back, pressure of blood increases because there is a lot of blood water in. Why blood volume increases? Whatever water is taken back, it is taken back in blood. So this water is bringing about the increase in volume of blood. Once the volume of blood is increasing, that means the pressure of blood increases in capillaries or in blood vessels. So here what this ANF does, this is present, it is released from the auricular wall of this heart. It recognizes the pressure has increased or it is increasing more and more. So that is the reason it slowly brings about dilation of vascular bundles. What is dilation? Increasing the volume or the lumen of, not volume, sorry, it is increasing the lumen of the blood vessels so that the pressure becomes normal. So this is in opposite to what juxtaglomerular apparatus does. So in short, these are the 4 things which bring about osmoregulation process. What are the 4 things that we have learned over here? When you take less water, what happens? How nephric filtrate becomes very less. Then we have studied the role of ADH over there in producing hypotonic and hypertonic urine. We have also studied what RAAS stands for, and it is ANF which works again opposite to this RAS. So these are the 4 important mechanisms taken in our body, thus bringing about the regulation of water amount in our body. We'll stop over here to your students and continue with the other processes which take place in the body, that is with disorders and other differences, and as well as try to learn how this process of excretion takes place in other organisms in the other phyla, right from amoeba to echinodermata. Let's study all these things tomorrow. But for today, what we have understood so far, what is countercurrent mechanism, definitions, how it takes place, why it is important, then excretory organs we have learned, what are their main functions, ornithine cycle, 4 important steps of ornithine cycle we have covered. We understood kidney also functions, it performs other important functions other than excretion, and these are the names over here. These are the 3 processes, and out of this in detail we have studied all about osmoregulation. So osmoregulation in the other organisms, how it takes place, disorders connected to us, to human beings, and the excretory structures we will study tomorrow. Thank you very much. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Vijayalakshmi ma'am?
Yeah, thank you, madam.
Yeah, ma'am. Ma'am.
Thank you. And after knowing, understanding your lesson, I think students will start taking more water than troubling our own system.
Yes, true, very true. In fact, I wanted to talk about that, how to take care of the excretory system tomorrow, in tomorrow's class.
Yes.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for being with me.
Class. Yes. Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Stay safe. Thank you.